Well, good morning. I'm talking to you today from my office where I spent a lot of time over the last couple months. A lot of time thinking, a lot of time working, a lot of time talking to God, and a lot of time listening to God. And today I just want to take a couple minutes to talk to you about what's going on in our country right now. You know, a few years ago, in my last job, I had the opportunity to visit Senegal with a group of about 30 from our African American Association inside of the denomination. And we were going over there to repeal 3 bylaws that were on the books from the 1950s. And each of those bylaws in the denomination prohibited African Americans from serving as missionaries with the denomination. Now, those bylaws had long since been ignored, but they were still on the books. And so we went over. I talked the president and the vice president into coming along with us. And we spent some time together as a group. We went on a safari. We visited Gorée Island, just off the coast of Senegal. And this was the island where the people from West Africa that went to the Americas as slaves gathered and were put on boats. And I remember standing in a house and looking at the doorway where they loaded onto the boats, and it was called the doorway of no return. As you can imagine, it was a powerful time, especially with the group of people I was with. Then we had a church service. We worshiped God, and one by one, we repealed each of the bylaws. And we repented for having made those. We had communion, and then the president of the denomination washed the feet of the leaders of the African American Association. So you can imagine there was a lot of crying. There was a lot of pain that was coming out. I'll never forget the wailing that I heard. And it was wailing because decades long, centuries long pain was being ridded, was being flushed from people's hearts. This issue is deeply personal for me. As many of you know, my son is African American. And when he was growing up, we saw many acts of racism directed towards him. Some subtle, some overt, but all of them painful. I had to have a lot of hard conversations with him as he began asking questions as a 7 and 8-year-old. Things that I had to tell him that applied to him, but not to me. He still has questions as a 21-year-old today. He still lives with a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear. You know, a few years ago, I helped run a large youth conference in Florida. And I was sitting in the front row as the main stage speaker was wrapping up his talk. And he was giving his call to action. And in the front row next to me was a young 15-year-old girl who was bound to a wheelchair. She couldn't walk. And sitting next to her was her mother. And as the speaker was giving his call to action, he said, "If you're with me on this, I want you to stand up." And I looked through the crowd as literally hundreds of students were beginning to stand one by one and saying, "I'm with you. I'll stand with you." And I remember this 15-year-old turning to her mother and saying, "Stand me up, Mama. Stand me up, Mama. I want to be a part of this." You know, sometimes we need help standing up. Sometimes we need to be taught how to do it. But this is an injustice. And this is what Jesus calls us to. So I'm asking you, church, will you stand with me? Will you stand with my son? Will you stand with all those 7 and 8-year-old children of color right now that are just becoming aware of the world and what's happening? This is what we're called to do. This is why Jesus left the 99 to go get the one. Not because he cared less about the 99, but because the one needed the help right then. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen.